Okay, welcome to video 2 for our dragonfly motif that's going to circle a blanket. This video is going to go over how to do a little border, just to give it something, a little sweet touch. I'm using Bernat Softy Baby. This one is just in plain white. You could use whatever color you want. And I'm just going to show you how to attach the yarn and just do a little quick border to give it a little bit more uniformity, particularly in the vertical edges here. The base and the top are typically pretty straight, but the edges get a little muddled. So I'm going to attach it to begin at the top. So to attach your yarn, you're just going to go into the rightmost stitch up at the top with your hook. And then you're going to thread that border color yarn, whatever you choose. I am using the exact same brand of the yarn, so it's the same thickness or same weight, right? If you want to double check your yarn, you can take a look at the little tag. You can see like the weight of the yarn. You can see the recommended stitch or hook size. So I would either use like the exact same brand just in a different color, or just try and get the size as close as you can so it doesn't look too off. I'm just gonna do a little knot. I like to do it twice just to make sure it doesn't untie itself. And then to begin stitching, what we're gonna do is we're gonna put our hook back in that stitch, and then you're gonna pull the working yarn that's attached to the ball through. Got a little stuck. There we go. And then you're gonna yarn over and pull through to create a chain. So we're kind of chained up one. And then what I'm gonna do for my border, I find it's easy to do a row of single crochet and then decide if I wanna do more or just that. So I'm gonna go into the stitch, grab the yarn, pull it through, 2 loops on the hook for a single crochet, and then yarn over and pull through 2. And then I'm just gonna mark with my stitch marker just to indicate where that first stitch was. You don't have to do this, it's just visual. You could also use the paper clip as well. Okay, so I'm going to continue on with the next handful of stitches. Just going to adjust the camera so you can see it a little bit better. I'm just going to single crochet, so into the stitch, grab the yarn, pull it through, 2 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through 2. And I'm just going to continue with that all the way along. Notice as I'm doing this, I'm going on top of this little tail. So as I'm going, I'm being careful to go and trap the tail. That way it'll hide it, and then we can snip it off at the very end. And it's just a cleaner look. That way you don't really notice where you attach the yarn as much. It just gives it a nice clean line. So we're going to continue to single crochet all the way across, right into the stitch, grab the yarn, pull it through, 2 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through 2. We're going to continue to do that all the way across. So remember, from my motif, that means it will be 19 stitches across. If you decided to make your motif a little bit larger, then it'll just be, however far across you go. And then right there, we've kind of finished off with that tail. So if you do want to snip it, I flipped it over. I'm just going to use my scissors and just snip it close to the edge. Okay, so we're going to just continue single crocheting across, and then I'll show you what to do for kind of the side there, because it's not quite as clear where you want to put your stitches. Okay, we're almost to the edge. Just a couple more stitches. And we will also be going on top of this little tail here, just to give some nice clean lines as well. Ooh, and now if you look, I've kind of caught a little bit of the purple. So anytime you accidentally catch, just pull it back and undo. Okay. So we finished the first edge, we're gonna go along this side now. These are kind of open to interpretation, like people do different things. The biggest thing is you want to be consistent with how many stitches you put here, and then as you do more of these, you want to be consistent. My rule of thumb is that these are all double crochets. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, looks like 7 rows of double crochets. So with that in mind, I would probably do 2 single crochets along each double. So we have like double here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I would probably try and get 2 in. So at the end, the thought was we would have 14. We'll see how that goes. It is a little hard to see where you want to stitch. So I kind of just will go like along the edge and just kind of try and grab a little bit of that border stitch. So this part is never an exact science, unfortunately. So that's one, and then I'm going to do a second one, just kind of grabbing the side. You want to try and get 2 loops on your hook as best you can. But like I said, it's not an exact science. So that's 2 in the first one. So now our next one's here. So I'm going to kind of do one right there where they kind of link. And then do a second one like right here. Like I said, not an exact science. At the end, you just want to make sure your sides match. That's the biggest thing I would say. Just kind of go into where it seems kind of intuitive that you would have, you know, some kind of a stitch. So I've kind of started almost doing like here and then this almost like a little joining section. If you can see, I'll kind of zoom in a little bit more for you guys. So I'm just kind of going along the edge as best I can. Then I'm kind of go in here. And as I am continuing, I am trying to go over that purple tail as best I can to just hide it a little bit nicer. Okay, almost there. And then what I'll do is at the end, I'll just count. And I'll probably be about 14 would be my goal. And then I'll just make sure that the other side is the same. If you find that you use a different amount of stitches, like if you don't use 14 exactly, that's totally fine. As long as it looks like, you know, as long as it created like a nice little line for you, that's totally fine. Like I said, it's not quite an exact science where you want to put your hook. These are the harder sides. And if you ever want to do like a fancier border than just single crochets, I do recommend to always do a foundation of those single crochets, just because as you can see, it does get a little tricky to find where you're stitching. So it's a lot easier to do fancy borders after you've done a row of single crochets. Okay, we're just about there. I'm gonna try and get this little kind of edge. All you want to do is have those 2 loops on your hook. So once you have that established, you are golden. Okay, and then I'm gonna also, I want to go into this like kind of last stitch here. It's like a pseudo stitch. So let's see how many that is. See if I'm at 14 or so. So with that last stitch, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And then this is kind of like that little curve right at the edge. So it's about the right amount. Like I said, it's not an exact science. If you have like one more stitch on this side than this side, it doesn't make or break. Going through the bottom is actually much easier. What you're going to be doing is you're stitching here. I'll kind of pull my hook out. So at the base of each of these is almost kind of like a crisscross of yarn. So we're just going to be kind of going right at the very top of each of these stitches into that little crisscross of yarn. That's where your turning or your original chain was, right? Your foundation chain. So we're just going to be going into that, and it's super easy. They're like pretty close to a stitch. So it's much easier for people to spot. We are going to try and go over these two tails that I have. Okay, so for the first one, I'm just going to go right on top. And we're going to kind of treat those as like stitches. They're much easier to see. So where the yarn crisscrosses, right on top of each of those stitches is where we're going to be going. Okay. And we're just going to be doing single crochets, same as before. Continuing to go over those tails. If you forget, you can always, just pull your yarn and backtrack. Okay, nearly there. Okay, let me just get some more yarn going. And at this point, like if you're kind of good with how much of the tails that you've gone over, you can always snip them. You don't have to go over them forever. You just want to have enough that it hides your tails in a pretty way. We just want to avoid having like little bits of yarn sticking out everywhere in our blanket. And so this is a pretty clean way to hide them. So at this point, the smaller one is kind of narrowing down. So I think I am just going to snip those two just real quick. Be done with them. And then they hide nicely in the back. So looks very clean after. Okay. So we're just about done doing our single crochets along this edge. So it looks like we've got two more. So 1 and 2 gets us to that edge. And then we're going to start kind of curving. And we want to do about 14. Remember, your goal is about 2 in each of the double crochets. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so here's the first one. I'm just going to angle myself and hook into, you want to try and get like 2 bits of yarn. So that's 1, and then here's 2. You're just going to use those, turning chains that you did on the end where you chain 2 to rise up to the next height. So those are typically what we're going to be grabbing into. That's 1. And the stitch is like a little trickier, so I'm going to do my second one kind of over here. Not an exact science. So next one, we want to get another 2 kind of right on the edge of those stitches. That's 1, and here it looks like is kind of my second spot. Just wherever it'll fit. Okay, go right here on the edge under those 2 loops. And then I'm going to do my second one kind of across. I think you'll find that you get into a rhythm as you do it. You just kind of get used to reaching in similar spots to put your stitches. Okay. And then just about done. Oh, you're not being cooperative. There we go. Okay, so we've done that border. If you wanted to check, you could double check that you have about 14 to match. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And then we do want to attach that first stitch here. So I'm going to pull out my stitch marker. That way I can work with that space. You can always use a paper clip if you don't have stitch marker. Not necessary. I do think stitch markers are useful for bigger projects where you just need to keep track of distance, or if you want to kind of count every, you know, however many stitches just to space stuff out. They're super useful for bigger projects, but if you want something just to mark your first stitch, a paper clip is like more than sufficient. So to attach to that first one, we're gonna go into the top of that first stitch. We're gonna grab the yarn, pull it through, and pull it through the original one to kind of slip stitch it in. And then at this point, I am good with this as my border because I'm gonna have a large purple middle piece or middle section for my blanket, and these are gonna be bordering it. So I don't want a ton of thickness here because I am gonna, after I put them as a border, put some more white all around. So I don't want it to be too much. If you did want to continue with this and continue with a cool border, you could do some double crochets along the top. If you want to get really fancy, like if you're making, you know, really big piece, like a big blanket, I do like to use a shell stitch on my blanket, which has those kind of scalloped edges. But I prefer to use that for a blanket border rather than just like the little border tiles. I think it makes it a little nicer to have a clean look for your border tiles. So at this point, I've got it attached. I'm just going to yarn over and pull it through just to secure it. I'm going to snip my yarn, leaving just a little bit of a tail. Don't need a huge tail. And then I'm going to pull it through, and you'll see that it has knotted. If you want a more secure knot, I typically will go into the back and kind of pull that little tail in, like under some previous stitches. And then once I have it pulled under a couple, I typically, you know, kind of attach it to those little bits that are gripping onto the purple. We are not wanting to come up. Let's try this one then. So I typically use these stitches in the back, and then I'll kind of pull it through to kind of hide that. And at this point, if you wanted to make a little knot and have it hidden, you could kind of pull it around one more time. Just get that going. There we go. If you wanted to make a little knot, you could pull it through that space one more time and then pull it through that little loop to create a little knot. If you wanted it to be a little bit more secure. And then at this point, we do want to hide this. So you have a couple options. You can either use a darning needle to hide it in. I sometimes prefer to use the smaller crochet hooks myself. So what I've got here is just, you can see it's a lot smaller hook size. This one is a 1.9 millimeter. I've been using a 4 millimeter. So what I'm doing on the back side here is, again, these like white bits of the stitch that are gripping onto the purple. I prefer, compared to using a darning needle sometimes, I kind of like just using a crochet hook. I'm only using a smaller one just so it slides under the stitch a little bit better. Sometimes if you use the same size, it's a little tight. But I really like it just because it's quick and it doesn't involve threading a needle, which sometimes I don't feel like threading a needle. So you just want to pull it under a handful of stitches, right? Once you're satisfied and you have a good hold, you're just going to pull it a little taut and snip the yarn so that the tail is hidden. Okay, so now I'm going to flip it back to the front. You can tell the front based on how your white stitches look, right? You can see the difference between that and these look a little bit different on the back side. You can put the back side as your front side, whichever one you think looks more pleasing visually. But here we have original, and then look at how cute it looks with that little border. I think it just makes it really classy, really sweet. And then if you want to continue on with how to do the blanket, I'll kind of walk you through in the subsequent videos how to do the middle of the blanket and attach everything together.